Hi everyone, this is just going to be a fairly short video of me showing you how to draw a realistic eye from the front view or how to paint it. And I'll be using Photoshop to do this. And the brush I'm going to use is just this standard brush here. I've got this button up here turned on, which is always use pressure for opacity. So basically the softer I press, you can see there, it's not as dark. The harder I press, the darker it is. That's not really important, but people always ask me what sort of brush and brush settings I'm using. So to start with, I usually try to just draw in like a rough shape, roughly of the eye, just so that I know where it is that I'm going to be working. Now try and do it quite faint so that you can erase it afterwards, depending on how you're doing this. And I'm going to start with some construction lines. So I'm going to start about here, not quite at the bottom of the eye. And I'm going to get 3 lines to make up the top of the eyelid. Now this is only quite rough, so please spend a little bit more time than me. And you'll notice this bit here I've cut off slightly above where we started, and the next one I'm going to bring down about here, which is slightly to the left of this bit, and then we're going to bring it, join it up again out here. So these are our sort of basic construction lines for making the eye. And we are going to go over these and neaten them up a little bit, but please spend more time than me anyway. I'm just keeping this fairly short for the purpose of the tutorial. So I'm going to add in this little bit here, which is just for the tear duct, and I'm just going to separate that to the eye. I'll zoom in slightly, and I'm just going to go in and refine these edges a bit so they're not so sharp. Just round them off a little bit to give it a bit more of an organic feel, or to make it a little bit neater if nothing else. You can change the shape slightly as well if you don't feel it's quite how you want it. I would advise maybe having some reference open, a photo in front of you of an eye that you're drawing if you are practicing. Okay, so that's our basic shape. We've refined it slightly. You might want to spend more time going in with an eraser and actually erasing some bits. So I'm just going to mark in roughly the crease of the eyelid, which will obviously shape around the eyeball itself. So there's not going to be much of a gap here. It's going to start a little bit thinner there, and it's going to get a little bit wider as it comes out. Roughly something like that will do. And again, you would have a slight crease on this bit here as well, on the underside, but it will be a lot less defined than that. If you have it too defined, it usually makes the eye look very, very tired. So because this is a ball, a sphere shape, what I'm going to try to do just very quickly is just give it a little bit of lighting, a little bit of shadow to give it a more spherical feel, to make it a little bit more 3D basically. So just with the opacity on, I might be going a little bit too dark here, but the idea here being that the eye is a ball or a sphere, like so. And obviously it is going to get darker the further it turns away from the light. So roughly something like this, but obviously with the eye drawn over it. Sorry, I've drawn that a little bit low on there, but it's fine for this. And I'm going to start just by drawing in the pupil, the black bit of the eye, which I'm going to put in about here. I like to put it fairly close to the top eyelid. And then I'm just going to draw a bit around that, which is going to be the iris. Now again, it will depend on the direction this person is looking in, as to where the pupil and iris will be. But if they're just looking forward on a front shot like this, I try to give it something like this. I'm just going to darken this bit to show where it is, because obviously the pupil and the iris are both going to be darker than the white of the eye, which, as you will notice, is not completely, it's not completely black, completely white even. Completely black would be terrifying. One thing I do like to do is just make it slightly darker around the outside of the iris. So something like this, and we will come back to neaten that up slightly. So the idea with the lighting here is that it's coming from head on but slightly above, so coming down from here kind of thing, which means this bit of eyelid is still going to be wrapping around the eye itself. So going back to this this bit here. So I'm just going to shade that a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my eraser, and I am just going to erase this bit like so. And the idea being here that this is actually the eyelid itself, the sort of, let me draw this from the side view. So this is the eye, and the bit you see in here is actually this little bit here. And because of the direction of the light is going to be coming down and actually lighting the plane of the eyelid. Hopefully that made sense. It sometimes works having a little bit of black contrasting against it, but sometimes, well, sometimes it doesn't. Just try it and see what works. Next to this, I'm just going to add a little bit of darkness here to sort of define where the eyelashes go, because it's not usually a good idea to add each of them individually, but rather adding a little bit of shadow, a little bit of darkness to sort of imply where they're going to go. That being said, we will add some individual ones in as well. So seeing this from the front view, if we can see the bottom one here, you might be able to see this plane of the top eyelid here. But this time it's going to be opposing the light. I'll draw this up here. So say the lighting is coming roughly from here. This plane is going to be lit up. This one here is not going to be getting much light at all. In fact, it's going to be in shadow. So I'm just going to take a little bit of thickness. I've maybe drawn this a little bit too thick, but that's okay because the eyelashes will sort of blend into this darkness anyway. And also you have to remember there is going to be a little bit of drop shadow coming from here, so this bit here is going to be in shadow as well. So I'm just adding a little bit of darkness in here, a little bit of shadow, a little bit of drop shadow. And I'm just going to darken this bit of tear duct as well, because if you saw the values, the black and whites of the red of the tear duct, it would be slightly darker than the white bits, obviously. So adding a bit of light into this top eyelid, what you're going to get, let's draw this from the side. The eyebrow is going to be along here kind of thing. Terrible drawing of it. But this section here is actually going to be in shadow. This bit might be in shadow a little bit. It might catch a little bit of light up here, but this bit's going to be quite dark. And then this bit of eyelid here, again, like this bit, is going to catch some light. But as it goes further back, it might catch more shadow. So let's roughly paint that in. Just going to start with a base coat. So this bit is going to be in shadow. Again, it's going to get a little bit darker as it gets closer to that crease. And obviously this bit is a bit too bright there. Only sort of this bit of it would be in light. As it turns to these side bits here, it's actually wrapping around the ball itself. So the plane is not going to be fully in light as much as this bit here, at least. Again, it's going to be getting a bit of occlusion shadow as it goes into these bits, into the crease of the eye. There's not much lighting is going to get into the crease. Again, same with this this bottom eyelid. It's going to, as it goes to the side, it's going to be catching even less light. Sometimes with this bottom eyelid, this bit here gets a little bit of bounce light, which comes down here and bounces back up. So it's sometimes a little bit brighter here, so you could actually erase a bit. But again, have a look at your reference for that. What I am going to quickly do before we move on is I'm just going to select my blending brush. You could maybe have used a soft brush or spend more time to blend this better. Again, I'm trying to save a bit of time, so I'm just doing this quite quickly. It's looking a little bit messy as well, but as long as you can tell what I'm doing. So I've just blended that slightly, and I'm just refining the shadows a little bit in case I lost anything when I blended it. Usually the less you blend it, the more sort of painterly it looks. Sometimes it can look a little bit too airbrushed when you blend it, but that's down to opinion. So I'll let you decide on that yourself. And again, just making sure this edge bit of the iris is a little bit darker. What I'm going to do is draw in some faint lines quite randomly, coming in sort of to the pupil like this, and I'm going to put more of these, getting smaller and smaller, to the edge of to the outside even. Sorry, I'm not very good at talking whilst I attempt to paint. So they're going to come in towards the pupil. And then I'm going to do the same, but a little bit less, but coming from the inside of the pupil. Again, going in the direction. Now we've got a little bit of shadow just along the top of the iris that we put in earlier, below the whole eyelid. But there's actually a little bit more lighting along this bottom half. And the reason for that is the eye actually shapes inwards like this from the side view. It actually comes out a little bit here as well. So if you imagine this is almost like a bowl from the side. So from above, if you imagine looking down on like a bowl, if the lighting's coming again from above, head on above, the inside of the bowl is going to be lit up like so. So this inside bit here is going to be in shadow, and this plane here is going to be in the light, like so. So that's the inside of the eye. So because of that, I'm just going to lighten some bits, just using my eraser, roughly something like this. But then on top of this inside bowl here, we've got a bowl almost going in the opposite direction. So if you flip the bowl, you've got it coming on this side here, and this time this section is going to be hit by light, and this section is going to be in the darkness. So the inverse of this, like so. So if you put these two together, this one is going to be on top of this. But the way this works this time is actually more of a highlight. So instead of all this lighting like this, it's going to be sort of using your eraser, a strong highlight like this, which is why we get highlights on the eyes like so. Now obviously it will depend on your light source. I'm just going to put two in like this. Highlights usually make an eye look so much more realistic and so much better usually. So the light in the iris that we see here is looking down like this. This bit's lit up here. This bit in here is darkness, but then we've got a bowl on top of that which is catching the highlight, which means the iris is going to be darker at the top and lighter at the bottom, but then it's going to have white highlights on top here. You also, because the eye is shiny because of the liquid on it, you're going to get more sort of quite, well, very white highlights like so, where a little bit of liquid builds up, usually a bit sort of in here. Again, this will vary. Try to keep it fairly simple with the highlights though, because if you do too many, it can end up spoiling it a little bit. And I'm just going to define this bit a little bit more down here to give it a little bit more three-dimensionality. So what else have we got left? We need to add some eyelashes. Now depending on this is a male or a female, it's going to affect how sort of dark the eyelashes are. I draw more females than males, so I'm going to go ahead and give them sort of darker, thicker eyelashes. Again, this is where your reference comes in handy. So before I actually go in and define every individual eyelash, I'm just marking in roughly where they're going to go. And this helps sort of just darken the area, because sometimes it can give the impression of sort of thin, not so attractive eyelashes if you put them all in individually. So I'll darken that up a little bit as I go. And the way this is going to work, as this is turning around a sphere, eyelashes on this side are going to go more off in this direction, eyelashes on this side are going to go more off in that direction, and it's going to turn as it goes. Hopefully you can see what I mean by that. So you can see how these actually turn around with the eye. Although eyelashes are usually thickest sort of in this section here, and usually very thin if at all on this section. In fact, sometimes you actually see eyelashes just drawn in something like that, and that's actually a really good way to simplify them and do that. I actually quite like the look of that. But what I'm going to do is just paint them in. I'm going to switch to a brush that actually gets thinner as I start defining these a little bit. And sometimes it's quite nice to actually group the eyelashes together, almost forming a triangle, so instead of them all being very uniform like that, sort of bring some together as if they're sort of clumping up. Try and keep them quite thin as they go to this side. And it's almost going to be a straight line as they come to the centre. But as it turns, the eyelash is going to turn with it, or the perspective that you see the eyelash in. Now I'm sort of happy with them, so what I am going to do, I'm going to switch back to the other brush for starters. I'm just going to darken where they sort of go into the eyelid, as then you don't sort of notice them being quite as individual, again, which can look a little bit silly. So if you just darken the area as a whole, almost going for what I was saying earlier with like this sort of eyelash, but we've tried to make it a little bit more detailed and realistic. Sometimes you actually get a little bit of the reflection of the eyelashes, or the shadow of the eyelashes in the highlight, like that. I'm not going to bother with that though. And now we need to put some along this bottom one. These ones are usually a little bit thinner than the top eyelash, or the eyelashes on the top lid, and again are going to turn around as we go. So I'm trying to make them a little bit messy, again not too uniform, a little bit random, which just helps make them look a little bit more realistic. And again I'm just going to darken the whole area a little bit. Now I think I have actually defined this bottom eyelid a little bit too much, to be honest. It probably wouldn't be quite as white as that, so I'm just going to go in a little bit to darken it up, because it's as bright as the actual highlight. Right, so if I zoom out a little bit, wrong way, you can see how it kind of looks like a realistic eye. Now when you draw the second eye, you could, if you're working in Photoshop or any digital program, potentially just clone this, copy it and paste it to this side. If you're new, I would still, if you're trying to practice, I would still advise drawing it just to improve your skill, I guess. But also make sure that you reverse the way the highlight is. So if you just copy and paste this and flip it, the highlight is going to be on the wrong side. But you can quite quickly just paint over that. And I think that's pretty much all I need to say in this video. I want it to be fairly basic and just give some ideas of where to start with drawing the eye from the front view. So yeah, thank you for your support and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. You can subscribe to my channel by clicking on the subscription button at the bottom of the screen. You can also see some of my other videos by clicking the video links on screen now. Links to my Facebook and DeviantArt can be found in the description box. Thanks for watching.